Good evening. I would like to call to order this Planning Commission work session of Thursday, June 9th, 2022. The first item on our agenda is to stand and say the Pledge of Allegiance. I think we will dispense with the opening remarks for tonight, other than to say that I know that we all continue to pray for all those in Texas that lost their sweet little babies and all those across the country who are remorseful and who are missing their poor children and others as a result of gunfire and other ways that we've lost our children and loved ones. Through whatever means. I'd like to have someone who is willing to review and make a motion to adopt the minutes. Do I hear a motion?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I move that the Loudon County Planning Commission approve the minutes for the Loudon Planning Commission work session dated May 12th, 2022 as presented.
No.
The motion made by Vice Chair.
No meeting on May 12th.
This says
Wait a minute.
this says May 12th.
That meeting was postponed or canceled.
That was incorrect.
So do we have the correct date? Mr. Galindo?
We don't have minutes then.
We
We have minutes in our packet.
The minutes should be from April.
Yeah, that was
6th.
from April 26th. We had a public hearing on the 26th of April.
But you should be
No.
approving the work session minutes from April 6th.
It looks like just
This
the
says
date is
May-
incorrect on.
This
I
says
think-
May 12th. Mine say May 12th.
But I think the content is per April. That's right.
Okay, so Mr. Galindo, you give us the correct answer.
I will check the file myself. But the April 6th are the minutes. Those were the minutes that I approved to be in your packet. If they had a different date on them after the fact, I apologize. But
But we did have a
Did
public
we-
hearing on the
Just topic
26th,
says
correct?
that. Everything else.
yes, but typically the minutes that you approve at a work session are the previous work session minutes and then the public hearing.
Okay.
And it's
So-
for April 6th.
So we're doing April 6th. Okay. Mr. Vice Chair, you want to revise your?
I will. I rescind my motion since it was lacking a second, and I move that the Planning Commission approve the minutes for the Loudon County Planning Commission work session dated April 6th, 2022, as presented.
Second.
The motion made by Vice Chair Solomon, properly seconded by Commissioner Miller. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, the motion carries. Disclosures. Commissioner Barnes. Commissioner Vance.
None.
Commissioner Miller.
Just one, I met with Mike Romeo from Walsh Colucci and the applicant team regarding the innovation multifamily on May 9th.
Commissioner?
Yes, Mr. Chair. I have two. On June 7th, I had a Zoom meeting with the representatives of the applicant team and Ms. Jackie Marsh regarding the Ravana application. And today on June 9th, I had a very large Zoom call, also with Commissioner Combs and Supervisors Turner and Glass, and a slew of folks from the applicant's team, as well as some county staff regarding the Hyde Park application.
Thank you, Commissioner Frank. Commissioner Merrithew.
Thank you. On May 16th, met with Colleen Gillis, Ben Wales, Molly Novotny, Nick Over to discuss ZRTD 21 0008 Moran Road, and ZCPA 21-0002 1 Loudon. On June 3rd, I met with Hobie Mitchell, Matt Leslie, Aaron Swisshelm, and Jeff Gillians to discuss ZMAP 21-0008 Village at Clear Springs. And on June the 7th, I met with Colleen Gillis, Bill Junda, Carlos Oliveira, Josh Sims, and Royce to discuss the H5 Data Center Special Exception 21-0046. And on June 7, again with Colleen Gillis, Amanda Williams, Wiley Nelson, and Matt Mule to discuss Marie's Road ZMAP 21-0014. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Kirchner.
None for me, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Commissioner Combs.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. On June 9, I had a video conference with Mike Romeo, John Baynard, Rich Brittingham, and Grady Vaughn regarding the Innovation Multifamily application. And this afternoon/evening, I participated in that all-hands Zoom meeting that Commissioner Frank described regarding Hyde Park. Thank you.
Vice Chair Salmon.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. On Saturday, June 4th, I had an in-person meeting with Hobie Mitchell, Randy Minshew, Mike Wilkinson, Aaron Swisshelm, and Matt Leslie regarding the Village at Clear Springs application. On Tuesday, June 7th, I had a telephone conversation with Mike Romeo from Alchkalushi, John Breinert from Gray Star Development, and Grady Vaughn from Wells and Associates to discuss the Innovation Multifamily application. And that concludes my disclosures. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair. I have no disclosures. So we will move along to our work session items. The first item on our agenda is an early look at the zoning ordinance rewrite draft. And there you are. How are you doing this evening?
I'm doing very well, thank you.
Good.
Just one moment while I pull up the presentation.
Miss Judy Burkett?
Burkett.
Judy, forgive me.
That is fine. It's commonly mispronounced.
Well, you know you're one of my favorites. I'm tired. I'm old and tired today. So I'm old every day, but I'm tired today.
Okay, let's get started. This item provides you an update on the zoning ordinance rewrite project and an opportunity to see draft text for Chapter 5, which is the Development Standards chapter. I'd like to start with just an overall update of the project timeline. As you are aware, the first draft zoning ordinance is available currently from April 18th to July 18th for a 90-day public comment period. And we're inviting everyone to use the online platform to enter those comments. The Planning Commission, we're working with Dan and the commissioners to schedule a public hearing ideally in August or early September. That'll be followed by multiple work sessions, 6 to 8 work sessions in September, October, November, and we hope to go to the board for a public hearing as early as December. We're concluding our work with the Zoning Ordinance Committee, and they should be finalizing their findings and recommendations report on July the 6th. Now, moving into development standards, this is a really long chapter, but I'll try to be as quick as possible and just give you highlights. First, I'd like to just touch on what are development standards. And they're minimum standards that apply broadly to most new development in most zoning districts. And there are some exceptions, but they generally apply broadly across the board. And they're different in that way from use-specific standards that are specific to a particular use, like a quarry or a school. Also, in this development standards chapter, we have explanations on how to interpret or measure or calculate the different terms that are used in the zoning ordinance, such as how to measure building height so that it's measured consistently, and how to calculate floor area ratio. Some of the development standards are brand new in the draft zoning ordinance, and others have been carried forward pretty much as they are in the revised 1993 zoning ordinance. And then we have everything in between. First, I'd like to bring your attention to the 3 new sets of development standards: a variation of lot sizes, transitions, and adaptive reuse. And you'll notice that I've flagged the first one, variation of residential lot sizes. That's had a lot of discussion at the Zoning Ordinance Committee, and it is a controversial topic that we'll expect to have a lot of discussion in a work session. I'll give you a few of the highlights on the variation of residential lot sizes. This section adds new requirements that are intended to achieve a mix of lot sizes and dimensions and allow for a variety of housing opportunities and avoid a monotonous streetscape. These standards only apply to certain projects with 10 or more residential lots in certain zoning districts, and those are the suburban neighborhood or suburban compact neighborhood, the transition large lot or transition small lot neighborhood, and the joint land management zoning districts. Some of the key requirements are that those applicable projects would have to include a mix of different lot sizes, and they would need to be dispersed throughout the subdivision. Also, a maximum of 60% of a particular housing type would be allowed to be similar, only 60%. So you could have 60% of a certain size and 40% of another size, basically. But ZOC has a lot of concerns about this, that it could increase the housing stock, and they'd like us to look at other ways to achieve these, the intended purpose. So we are doing that. The next new set of standards is transition standards, and this section adds new standards to create transitions between larger scale or more intense uses and neighboring lower density, less intense residential uses. The key standards include gradually decreasing building heights to avoid an abrupt change and being mindful of where higher intensity uses are located on a site in order to minimize impacts on neighboring lower intensity uses, whether they're within or outside of a development. And the third and final new set of standards is adaptive reuse. And this section aims to preserve historic buildings or structures by reusing an underused or empty building. And an example could be converting a single-family dwelling into several live-work dwellings. If someone would like to adaptively reuse a building, these are the standards that that property owner would need to use and meet. Generally, they would need to locate any new parking to the side or rear of the building. And if they construct an addition, that would not be permitted to be on the facade. Also, we would ask that they retain historic features such as a stone wall, a brick wall, specimen trees, things of that nature. There's also new incentives in this section that, and this is the biggest one, it would allow a use that's not otherwise permitted in the district, and they're allowed to exceed the permitted floor area and reduce or eliminate the open space or parking requirements. Nextly, there's 3 sets of standards that are significantly different, and those are parking, natural environmental resources, and open space. Looking first at the parking. The new chapter is organized by general plan policy area, and that's the whole purpose of the rewrite is we're implementing the general plan. And some uses have a different parking requirement depending on which policy area they're located in. So that's new. There are also new requirements for electric vehicles, bicycles, car sharing, or motorcycles and scooters. And we've also drafted a new separate set of parking standards for villages. A couple other new things, there are minimum parking ratios have been reduced in some cases to coincide with common uses rather than peak demand. And we've added new parking maximums for some uses, and that's largely in urban or suburban districts. The Natural Environmental Resources chapter, this is something that's significantly different from the revised 1993 zoning ordinance. And this section implements the river and stream corridor resources that we've seen in the general plan for many years. That regulates and protects rivers and streams, major and minor floodplain, adjacent steep slopes, and riparian buffers. And the RISCR policies, river and stream corridor resource policies, do replace the Scenic Creek Valley buffer that's in the current zoning ordinance. Open space is also significantly different, but that's largely because we've consolidated the open space that's currently all in different sections of the zoning ordinance into one section. We've clarified what permitted uses are allowed in open space, and we've added new incentives for protecting higher quality open space. And that's more of an emphasis of quality over quantity. So if you wanted to protect a specimen tree or a high quality area of trees, then you might have to, you would be allowed to protect less. I know I'm really stumbling over my words, but quality over quantity is really the big deal there. We've added some maintenance requirements for open space and also a requirement that an applicant would have to submit a comprehensive open space plan for a rezoning. And this is the last slide. I know this has been a lot, and I'm not going to go deep into these at all, but I just wanted to tell you that these are the other sections that we've either retained the current regulations from the revised 1993 zoning ordinance or just modified them with very minor revisions to implement the general plan. So that is my update. And I know it's a lot, and once we get to the work session phase after the public hearing, we can dig deep into these because this is a lot of complex topics. But do you have any general input for us at this time?
Commissioners, questions for Judy? Commissioner Combs.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Judy. Certainly a lot to process here, and I appreciate all the work that's going into it. I had a quick question on the comprehensive open space plan that may be required under the new rewrite. Is that something that's designed for applicants to be able to address all open space requirements under the comp plan, under zoning, and get one fresh look at it? To the extent there are different open space requirements that are set forth kind of throughout the body of these documents, is this a way to consolidate all of that and make it less confusing for applicants?
That's one way to look at it, but ideally, the zoning ordinance is implementing the plan, so it should be pretty much the same as far as open space. But that's a comprehensive document that's easier to implement and enforce, basically.
And so is ZOC wrestling with how, for example, to give credit for certain open space allotments on sites, things of the issues that we tend to see, right? And where applicants, I know, run into issues with staff, disagreements over how to calculate open space, where to get credits and whatnot. Is that the intent, to really try to tackle that confusion,
It
discrepancy?
is, to try to clarify that so it's applied consistently and there's less room for interpretation. Yeah.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, if I could.
Absolutely.
Judy, if I could ask, related to that, part of the discussion that I was involved in, and I forget which subcommittee I was sitting in at the time, was the off-site open space credit. Is that still something being considered and proposed?
The last that I heard in one of the subcommittees was that the zoning ordinance committee only would support off-site open space if it was through a legislative process and only in rare circumstances. So that will probably not be part of the credit going forward.
Right.
Yeah.
So that was where I thought a lot of the discussion was. To your point, I think consolidating definitions of open space between the plan and the ordinance and coming to one definition is going to be the big benefit there.
I have a question.
Commissioner Barnes.
Yes, sir. Judy, we are talking, you said something about a special species of trees to protect one rather than protecting 10, that the species are not special. Is that what you said?
I intended to say a specimen tree, so like a heritage tree, a really large or old tree that are classified as specimen trees.
Specimen, okay, not specimen trees, okay. So, but we still are promoting more trees than less trees, right?
Absolutely, 100%.
Okay.
I was struggling to think of good examples of open space. So your hardwood stands of trees would be better than counting leftover spaces that are parking islands, that type of thing.
And the parking, you said that they might be rewarded by less parking if they do certain things? Parking,
Yes, that's for the adaptive reuse, recognizing that those historic buildings in villages or historic districts, they have special needs and can't always provide the additional parking. So as an incentive
talking
to,
about the existing development.
yes, that's correct.
Okay, thank you.
Vice Chair Salmon. Then we'll
Sure.
come back to you, Commissioner Miller.
Thank you. Judy, just some questions on parking, surprise. I noticed that there's a minimum and maximum for things like a single-family detached dwelling. Is there a reason why we have a maximum on that? I'm not sure we've ever had trouble with people giving us way too much parking.
That actually did come up in the zoning ordinance committee. That's something that the consultant recommended, and it sounds like what's coming out of SOC as a recommendation is no maximum for residential in any district.
Yeah, because I was going to ask you, how is it counted? I always like to joke with applicants that there's the county standards and then there's Jeff's standards, which ignores any parking underneath a townhome because, in my opinion, they're just really not used. So I would be concerned about maximums if specifically we had a maximum, because you got to figure out how you're going to count them. And that's really the devil's in the details, right? So that's really what it comes down to.
Yep, absolutely, I agree.
Thank you.
Commissioner Miller.
Thank you. Judy, I think it was in parking for electric vehicles. Were we considering electric vehicles, much like we consider parking for different types of things, for electric vehicles in different types of housing settings? I guess my question is really more focused on, are we differentiating between a bunch of townhouses and a multifamily building that has 300 units in it? Because we can't electrify every parking space in a multifamily, but I guess so. Are we considering? I guess how are they considering electric parking spaces?
Yeah, the charging stations for electrical vehicles, you'll see those more for event venues,
Okay.
like a large conference center or a large shopping mall, so no one will be stranded at one of those events or large shopping
Okay,
centers.
so it's not really more for residential parking. It's more for commercial parking.
It is, correct.
Thank you.
Commissioner Kirshner.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Judy, I just have a couple of questions. So when you talk about these standards applying to all new development, what about redevelopment? I guess we're looking at like an existing shopping center that might be redeveloped with a mixture of, residential uses and whatever. How is that going to be addressed here? Because I'm a little bit concerned that when we talk about protection of natural resources, that we're overlooking the opportunity to restore some key natural resources that might have been lost in a previous development and that are needed in the new proposed development.
So the short answer is yes, these would apply to a redevelopment, yes.
Okay, so you heard my input on that. And then I sort of following on with Commissioner Barnes' concern about looking at what are considered higher quality open spaces or important trees. I know you've got some good expertise on the committee there, but really want to underscore the importance of looking at sort of the larger natural systems and plant communities and corridors as opposed to just looking at one tree that might be beautiful, but if it's just singled out by, and I've seen this a lot in terms of the development here, thinking, we saved those nice specimen trees, but lost the rest of the plant community that they're a part of. So
I'll make sure that those resources you listed are on the list, because we want it to be very clearly defined what type of open space would be eligible for a bonus. And then when it comes to the Planning Commission, you'd have an opportunity to weigh in on that list.
Right, so, yeah, looking at the sort of like the larger plant and wildlife habitat systems, I think is really important. And that should not be just, and this plays in with my earlier comment, just restricted to something that is new greenfields development for looking at saving, but looking at when we have like a redevelopment, an opportunity to restore something that was lost before. So, and then, and one more question, just when you talked about the mix of lot sizes and the requirements for, I'm curious, when you talk about that in the suburban and the suburban compact neighborhoods, you know, what we're seeing now in the suburban and suburban compact neighborhoods is all multifamily. We're not seeing single-family lots. So, I mean, really, how would that really work there? And when you have a, you know, multifamily, I mean, I can think of many that we've looked at that are unfortunately just, you know, a long line of, you know, 4- and 5-story buildings.
Right, that wouldn't really apply to a multifamily building. It's, the intent behind that was more for a single-family detached, or when there's a mix of duplexes and triplexes, quadplexes, just to add variety to the street frontage.
So there's nothing in there that really, or not nothing, but I guess the comment is looking at achieving that variety and sort of avoiding that harsh rigidity, even when you have these multifamily residential developments, which is what we're getting mostly, almost exclusively in our suburban area. So, thanks. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Well, Judy, do you have anything else?
I don't. I thank you for listening to my long presentation and look forward to next time.
Well, your presentation was not that long, but it was very informative, and we need all that great information. So thank you again for being available to us, and we really appreciate it. And we look forward to continuing to work with you.
Thank you so much. Good night.
Good night. Next on our agenda, SPEX 2021-0001, Potomac Lakes Playground. Our project manager, Mr. Marchant Schneider.
Thank you. We've named the two clerk stations the penalty boxes, so I was in the penalty box. Back out. Rob Donaldson is on paternity leave. He had a young baby boy last week.
He did. Did his wife have anything to do with it?
I'm sorry, she had
Thank
the
you.
baby. That was a very wise assertion there.
I'm sure she appreciates us. To record straight.
So last month, you reviewed the application, in April, you reviewed the application for a replacement playground at the Potomac Lake Sportsplex, Centers around replacing an existing playground with upgraded equipment, also replacing the surface area or replacing with a more solidified surface. This graphic shows the extent of the major floodplain that exists on the property. This development predated much of the ordinances that we have in effect today. Notwithstanding our previous discussions about active rec uses in the floodplain, because this was limited to the previous disturbance, we felt it was appropriate and appropriately managed. So last month, the commission had asked for some additional questions about the extent of this equipment. In other words, there's a series of canopies, there's physically more structures. So while it's in a smaller footprint, there are more equipment pieces as part of the overall playground. I have representatives from Parks and Rec here this evening to walk you through sort of their thinking and what other options or potential things that they had looked at previously and some of the advantages they see to the proposal as it stands today. So there has not been an amendment or a revision to the application. But again, Parks and Rec here this evening to answer your questions.
Go right ahead. Commissioners, do you have questions? Okay, Commissioner Barnes?
Yes. I have a question. How long this playground has been in existence?
I believe this one's been in existence for over 10 years.
10 years. We didn't have any big problems with it like it is, right?
So it's being replaced primarily because of a safety issue. It's starting to dilapidate, and there's newer products out there that are safer for it. So we are slowly replacing a lot of the playgrounds throughout the county to the new standards.
You mean the bottom of it, and where they play? I'm talking about the ground.
The
not
surface?
Yeah. The ground stuff that you have sprayed around there, you have mulch up there now, right?
So currently, we do have what's called a wood carpet, but we are going to a newer standard, which we're putting in all of the new parks, which is a pour in place, which is a more of a, I guess, rubberized material. It has more cushion and protects from a higher fall than the wood carpet.
Well, do we have any standards, like if a playground is in a wet area, flood area, should be treated a little differently than the rest of the fields? You know, they might not have that issue. So I think we can go ahead and do whatever you want to do. And when this happens in a sensitive area that you're changing, that's where I come to question or worry about it. So I don't mind what you're doing for safety, you know, other places, but there's some exception to the rule, you know, like you can't be that rigid if it's in a floodplain or something that we use the same material, what you're using on a regular grass where there's no floodplains or anything else. I understand that, but I don't understand changing the material in the sensitive areas to do that. And it's been there 10 years and no big deal happened. So I think we could continue at that, in this field. This is in floodplain, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. See, that's what I'm talking about. And actually, then they say the rain comes out and all washes down the mulch. And mulch is biodegradable, but if you put the rubberized things, and they will wash down too. But in animals living in the wet land, like turtle or something, they swallow those things, they will damage them. Rubber, if they start munching on it or whatever it is, they do get choked up and all that. So we got to treat different areas a little bit differently than all of them the same. So I think there should be some exception in sensitive areas. That's what I think. Thank you.
Commissioner Kushner.
Oh,
I'll come back to you.
thank you.
Right. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so I just want to, Marshawn, confirm, were there any comments on this? I know it's in the report.
Public comments?
Yeah. Or
To
on
Dana,
the-
we've not seen comments on Lola, no, ma'am.
There were none on Lola, okay. And just to, and I know at the last meeting, like I'd asked for the Parks and Recs and folks to look at sort of if there could be any revisions in terms of minimizing the amount of area that has this new synthetic surface, and you have not, right? It hasn't changed since the last, okay. And it's made of plastic?
So I kind of want to combine answers to what Commissioner Barnes had asked and what you're asking right now. So originally the playground was installed back in '98. I think when you're talking about 10 years old, that's the current surfacing, that's the current equipment, et cetera. The current surfacing is a natural wood chip surfacing. And
I'm familiar with that.
sure, and the problem with the natural wood chip surfacing is it has safety rating standards where it's only acceptable for falls up to 10 feet in height. And that's only when it is regularly maintained. And that's because it has compaction issues. It compacts, it washes out with rainfall, and with all those washout areas, and not to mention the regular wear and tear of users at the facility, it compacts the surface. It takes away that absorption qualities, and it also actually turns it.
Sure, I appreciate that, but I'm interested, if you can answer first, What is the synthetic made of?
Sure, it's a recycled, I have it written here, it's a recycled material of rubber. It is not loose. It's laid in place, and then there's an adhesive compound so that it becomes stable.
Solid?
It's solid in that it does not move, it does not wash out, it does not run off, but it's porous. So whereas the wood chips compact and in a lot of ways become a hard, impervious type surface that leads to runoff and increased erosion of that safety surface, this is a porous, controlled surface. It has a lifespan of 15 years or so, and at that 15-year mark, when you may begin to see any of that degradation that you may be concerned of, it's at that point that PRCS is already going to be ahead of the replacement because their priority is the safety.
Right.
So in line with your concerns with impacts to the environment of degradation of the surface is exactly in line with the safety concerns for PRCS. Right. And I just wanted to add on, as I mentioned, the new facilities has playground equipment that exceeds 10, 12, 15 feet in height in some areas. Wood chips are not the standard. They are not rated for that kind of safety falls. This surface is. So the combination of all that, this is not only a better product for the environment than what's out there now, it's extremely better for the safety of the residents that are using the park.
Thank you, yeah, appreciate that.
Sure.
That long and very complicated response to my question. But I don't agree with you that something synthetic is better than natural. When we look at, especially when you're adjacent to wetlands and you're looking at the degradation of the synthetic materials and leaching into the adjacent wetlands and whatever things also, and I can see whatever other times where there will be, things flaking off. I'm curious, people are gonna have to clean this, right? So now when you've got a natural surface, water and dirt and dust kind of seep through it, but with this surface, people are gonna have to be cleaning it to keep it up. And also, I would imagine it's probably hotter. I visited a couple of the playgrounds, and I saw that there was warnings about, the equipment and the surface getting hot in the summer. So that's a bit of a concern, and it's concerning to me too because as you know, I live near there. It's my district. I walk there all the time. Ask a lot of people. Everybody really likes that park. They really enjoy it. The kids enjoy it. It's set in the natural area. It has the natural feel. It's unique. It has a really unique character. Everybody really appreciates and likes it, that park. I don't think that park is something people have an expectation for that to be something like an urban park that you would find in Arlington. My community and my district do not want to be urbanized. So that, something I think, is really important to the people that live here and the people that live here now. And then I guess my last question is the replacement of the structures or the equipment is going to be an increase, right? It's going to be more structures, more equipment, and more concrete footings than is existing now, right?
Correct.
Okay, how much more approximately?
So the measurements are based off of, if you look at the numbers, it's an increase of 2,500 square feet to 4,500 square feet. That's a measure essentially looking straight down at the platform area, stairs, and slides. So, but the reality of the impacts to the floodplain are that there's no impacts to the floodplain. The applicant has submitted a no-rise certification to the county as part of the special acceptance application. That's a FEMA certified certification that there's no impacts to the floodplain. The surfaces are porous. You know how the steel structures have holes, so water runs right through. It doesn't create a concentrated flow effect. That also applies to the shade structures on the top, and that will now hit this new porous rubberized safety surface, whereas currently the compacted, not maintained, despite the best efforts of PRCS, not maintained as adequately as it could be for the wood chips, where you're getting an impervious, even though it's a natural surface, it's actually impervious because of the compaction and the washout that occurs.
I understand.
That no longer happens. So yes, there is an increase in equipment and the square footage there. The actual footprint of the defined playground area has shrunk from 23,000 square feet to 21,000 square feet.
Right, but excuse me, I'm sorry, but the increase in the structures and the concrete footers is going to be larger, more than what we had before, right?
They are going to be more than we have before.
Okay, yeah, so I'm just, that's just going to say that I disagree with you on the compaction. I disagree with you on the wood chips. I'm over there, like I said, looked at it all the time, talked to all sorts of people that use it. No one's telling me that. I'm not seeing that, so I think it's a new thing that people might want to try, and it might be great in an urban area, but I don't think it's appropriate here. Thank you.
Let's see. I think Vice Chair Salmon was next, and then Commissioner Miller. You keep letting them beat you. I don't know how that happens.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have a couple questions. First, for the applicant. This new surface, is this a standard surface throughout Loudoun County Parks and Rec? Is this what's going to be used from now on? It sounds like it's a better product.
Yeah, we're moving to the standard. Hanson Park, which is our new regional facility, has 2 playgrounds with this.
With
product.
this on it as well. And so all new applications all new playgrounds will have this.
All new playgrounds and all playgrounds that we put through the CAP, which is replacement of playgrounds, will get the new surface.
When we refurbish a playground and provide new services to that, does that typically require a legislative application?
Not all of them.
Okay. Does the fact, and I guess this is for Mershant, does adding a pervious surface to a playground require, if all they're going to do is pull up wood chips and put down this new, I forget what he calls it, the magic carpet, the rubberized surface, does that require a legislative application?
The fact that it's happening in the floodplain does require it to have a legislative application.
Okay, so let's talk about the floodplain. Do wood chips fare better from an environmental standpoint in a floodplain area, or does this new surface provide a better environmental solution? Understand it's safer, but does it provide a better environmental solution in a floodplain area specifically rather than just in general?
The wood chips are a natural surface that are biodegradable, where this is not, but this will remain in place. At the time that its lifespan ends, 15 years, it is going to be up for its renewal and refurbishment to eliminate the chance of chunks of this surface popping off. If PRCS has chunks of surface popping off, they are long past due for the time for replacement.
So it would have been replaced well before that. It doesn't
Correct.
need to be cleaned. With a pervious surface, I would assume that it would naturally get washed away and the dirt and grime would go underneath the surface rather than having to regularly clean the surface.
There'll be minimal maintenance compared to the maintenance required to maintain the wood chip natural surface.
Okay, and the wood chip surface is less safe. It washes away, and doesn't wood chips washing away in a floodplain area cause even more environmental damage, because it's going to go to spots where we didn't want wood chips? And even though they degrade, they don't degrade in a week. They degrade over the course of a few years. At least that's what happens in my yard.
Sure, it changes runoff patterns. It changes it has all sorts of ancillary effects to the watershed as surfaces are moving throughout the floodplain. Yes.
So the argument could be made, because it's a pervious surface that stays where it's supposed to be, stays where you want it to be, it would be better for the environment in a floodplain area because of that.
That is our opinion.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Miller.
In the 23 years there's been a playground here, how many times has the flood come through and lifted this playground set off its moorings and taken it down the road? 0?
I'm unaware of any.
Okay.
Your question again, I'm sorry, make sure I clearly understand it.
In the 23 years the playground has been here, how many times has the flood come through and lifted the playground set off its moorings and off its footers and carried it out to the street?
The only major flood I recall was back when, I guess, when Agnes hit.
Yeah, so
And
none.
it didn't take the, I mean, it's still there.
It's
so.
still there. The whole premise of this is for safety. I mean, the alternative is we go back to the swing set that I had when I grew up. It's the same cartoon we've all seen of the solid metal structure wrapped in lead-based paint, completely metal. And I grew up in Miami, where it was 87 degrees in the middle of January, 140 degrees in August, and the structure was put on top of crabgrass, on top of limestone. We didn't have any cushions. I survived. So maybe we don't need all this safety stuff. Maybe we can just let it go the way it is and kids will survive the way they survive. I don't think that's the case. I think we're putting something that's safer, sounds like, and we have no history of problems with this being lifted off as moorings in the floodplain in 23 years, and no reason to think that's going to happen in the next. Thank you.
Okay.
Merrithew.
Trying to figure out. So, Commissioner Combs and Mr. Merrithew, and then the chairman's going to have a question, and then we're going to vote.
Thank you. I'll make it quick, Mr. Chair.
Oh, we're going to have a motion. I'm sorry.
Rich, you mentioned it's a no-rise certification, so when you resurface and you're going to put in the footers, new equipment, resurface, there is no change to the floodplain.
Correct. Can I give a slightly longer answer?
Yeah, please.
This application is triggered because we're putting incidental structures in the floodplain. The challenge is that there are already incidental structures in the floodplain. So what triggers the legislative application is the need to evaluate, hey, you're going to put structures in the floodplain. Does that change the flows? Does that change your limits of floodplain and have impacts based on those changes? And that's certainly a valid exercise to go through when you're dealing with floodplain elements. The legislative requirement is not triggered because of the use or because of the surfacing or anything. It is purely impacts to the floodplain. The challenge is the requirements are over 800 square feet of incidental structure, and we're counting the actual, like I said, the elevated platforms, et cetera, that are not actually impacting the floodplain. We should probably, when we do the floodplain study, we actually only count the footers, the footers that come out of the ground and support the equipment. The totality of the footers are well under 800 square feet. And so hence, there is no rise to it is the Potomac River major floodplain, so it would be hard to really have a drastic impact. But regardless, when you're replacing existing facilities and just calculating the footers, yes, there is no impacts to the Potomac River major floodplain per this application. That is why we have to file the no-rise certification. There's a site plan amendment that must follow this application should it be approved. But otherwise, as Marchant and Mark said, if this was outside the floodplain, we would not require a legislative application. Really, the goal of this is to ensure that this proposal does not have negative impacts on the floodplain and the adjacent uses and properties around that floodplain.
Got it. Okay, that's helpful background. Thank you.
Sure.
Commissioner Merrithew.
So if I understand what you're saying, is this application is before the commission because of the expansion of the equipment on the site?
It's the expansion replacement, yes.
Right. So going back to Vice Chairman Salmon's question, if we were just talking about replacing the ground material without changing the equipment, this would be a by right app. This would not be before us. Is that right?
We would file a site plan. We would not be required to have legislative.
Change the ground material without us reviewing it.
Correct.
Right. I'm a little curious, and you said this is porous material, and then I think the question was about the maintenance and maintaining that. Is it porosity? Maintaining the porousness of the material. Is there any extra or new maintenance that you have to do on this to maintain its porosity?
Yeah, I mean, this isn't like a bioretention filter where you have to come in, clean out debris underneath, et cetera.
Compacted and all that.
Sure, but I think that the reality of just the general PRCS maintenance of their facilities, the annual spring fall washing, cleaning, et cetera, is enough to kind of maintain the porosity of this. And then by the time you get to the 10, 15-year lifespan, you replace, that's when those major kind of clogs could occur, and by that time we need to replace because of the safety standards anyway.
And so okay, thank you. And you mentioned adhesive. How is it going to be adhered and kept stationary?
So this is a little bit out of my knowledge base, but do you want to take this one, or?
I'll try. So typically what they do in the pour in place in this product, it's basically, it looks like a meshing. They actually bring in shovels and they shovel the stuff in, they pack it down, and then they bring in a bonding element. So it's a bonding that goes on top. They pour it in. That's where the pour in place comes in, and it bonds the material. So that's really what brings everything together.
Dig it out, and create a surface for it and that bonds that surface.
There's an edger that holds the material, and then the pour in place on top.
Correct.
Thank you very much for that.
Okay. So I just had a few questions. So could you help me? And this is this doesn't come from a adversarial position. I just don't understand. So when we talk about the floodplains, eh, in other applications we've seen, there's been a heavy amount of consternation around active play uses in and around floodplains. Why don't we see this in this instance? There's been a lot of unreadiness about, having so much as, putting something like a swing set or having a boat launch, or the access to a boat launch that has to cross through a floodplain. Why don't we have that same issue here?
I can take that one. So two parts to that. One, it's an existing facility, and
Okay.
it has to do with a public safety issue.
Okay.
And two, because of its limited, although the surface area is increasing, the extent of which the clearing, the physical boundaries of the playground were not increasing, which is one of the floodplain criteria. We felt this was a unique circumstance, and in this context was appropriate versus where there may be new land disturbance to put in a new facility.
Okay. So thank you, Marchant. The second thing is, I know you guys are tired of hearing this, but I have always built more rec centers and playgrounds than you want to think about in DC, and all of them, this pouring place has been a best practice and all the rage in urban settings for at least the last. It was new kind of in 2006 and 7. It's pretty old hat now. And yes, it is more cushion, but it is more a material that allowed for less maintenance, and it was less costly for that reason. Because you didn't have to keep bringing the wood chips out. It wasn't necessarily, of course, it appeared to be safer because it had all this, because it seemed more bouncy in the beginning. That bounciness, if you will, wouldn't last, for lack of a better term. And so, for my colleagues who haven't seen much of it, it's almost like, this is not it, but it's almost like ground up tires, right? Is the material, but then it's in a almost liquid form that they pour in place, right? And I don't know if it's biodegradable or not. It doesn't appear to be, but it does crack over time. I don't know how much time, but we have had to replace them. So I guess, I kind of hold on to something that Commissioner Kirshner said a little while ago, which I thought was key. Maybe this is appropriate in an urban setting, but when we talk about certain parts of Loudon, and we're talking about floodplains and the kind of settings and the sort of, affinities for nature, et cetera, that we have, it becomes a tough decision.
I have a question.
So, I'm not necessarily trying to steer anybody. I'm kind of thinking out loud. But, this is not it's not an easy yes. And I would think that it could be detrimental to it's not an environmentally friendly material. Let me just put it like that. So if what we're always looking to do is to protect and think about environmentally sensitive solutions in our floodplains and in certain protected environments and spaces, This would be the opposite of that. All the other things you say is true. It's in some ways it's safer. It's certainly cheaper to use. It's durable. That's another fine attribute. It's durable, right? It's all the rage, and it does well with the new playground materials. But is it environmentally, you know, no. Okay.
I have a question.
So, Commissioner Frank.
Can I have a question? Can I answer? Sure.
Okay.
Okay, oh, yeah, oh, okay. Yes, sir.
I want to understand the mulch situation a little better. How do we measure it, I guess, in cubic yards? Is that, how much mulch is at this site now, and how often does it have to be replaced or replenished?
I couldn't give you an exact number of how much is there now, but I do know we replace it roughly every 2 years, theoretically, depending on how much gets washed out. And it's actually, just to clarify, it's not mulch, it's what we call wood carpet. So wood carpet is more expensive than mulch because it is a clean product that is for the purpose of not having splinters in it. So it's a specialized product that costs more than, when you say mulch, you're envisioning going to Home Depot, getting a bag of mulch. It's not the same stuff. It's clean, it's sanitized, and it's designed so that it's more of a safety. It has a little more bounce to it, but it does have to be replenished probably
Roughly
every 2 years.
every other year.
And it is, again, it's a lot in this area.
Yeah.
I mean, I could get you an accent, but it's a lot.
Well, I'm
cubic
just
yards.
trying to get an idea of how much of it goes somewhere it's not intended to go. And I mean, I can say from personal experience, it doesn't all go washing away places, because I know it comes home in little people's pockets and gets in my laundry machines. So, I don't want to make it sound like it all goes places we don't want it. Well, I don't want it in my laundry machine, but, it happens. That may be not as bad for the environment as if washing places and changing drainage patterns and things we don't want happening. But it is a lot of mulch, I guess, is what I'm trying to figure out. And it does sound like it doesn't stay put and only need replenished once or twice in a playground's lifespan before the equipment needs done as well. It's a pretty frequent process from what you're describing. Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Barnes, and then I'll have to hear a motion.
Thank you. Actually, I was leaning towards you a little bit, but when you said that the mulch comes in, these are ground-up tires. Most of them are. Rubberized mulch is nothing but ground-up tires. And when you pack them up, and then you put a solution on top of it to keep it together, only one thing will stick to rubber is petroleum product. That's what used to put rubber together, seal rubber together. So it's a liquid that's made out of petroleum to stick to it, otherwise it won't stick to it. So how much of it is going to seep right through it that we worry about spilling gas, spilling about different things? It's a petroleum product to glue it together. Nothing else will glue rubber together. I remember when bicycle tubes used to go bad, and we put a tube on it, and it was petroleum product. And you stick the patch on it, and they do still tire patching with the same material. When your tire goes flat, they put their glue on it, but that's made by petroleum product. So it is more than once. I'd rather see us replacing in that specific area every 2 years than waiting to replace every 10 years. But I'm sure this is much more expensive initially than the mulch is to install. And so if you take that and also consideration the price of it to start out with, so you probably can change 10 mulches and it still might not exceed the price you're going to pay for it initially set down and put it together. So, and it's better for the environment. The petroleum product that you put all over it is going to seep right through it, and it's where's it gonna go in the ground? So, yeah, I'm worried about it more now than I was before, until you said they put a liquid on top of it to put it together. The only thing can put it together, glue it, is the petroleum product. And, so that's where I'm at. I got more concern now. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Kirschner, do you have a motion?
I do. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I move that the Planning Commission forward SPX 2021-0001 Potomac Lakes Playground to the Board of Supervisors with a recommendation of denial based upon the following findings. The proposed synthetic fill surface material, concrete footings, and additional structures within the floodplain will have a negative impact on the surrounding natural resources, floodplain, and adjacent wetlands. The current playground equipment and surface material are appropriately serving the community and providing a facility that reflect protection of the natural assets and the character of the community.
I second it.
The motion made by Commissioner Kirschner has been properly seconded by Commissioner Barnes. Commissioner Kirschner, do you have an opening?
Sure, yeah. I appreciate the program that the Parks and Rec has, and you guys do some great stuff, and I've visited your more urban playgrounds. But as I said, I think that I know this is not appropriate for this particular playground, and I don't think there's a need for it. As I said, everyone that I've spoken to, and I've asked a lot of people when I'm over there, they really love the playground. They like the natural setting, they like the natural elements, they like the protection of the way it blends with the environment. I too I was concerned about sloughing off of the materials into the adjacent wetlands and what kind of toxicity that might pose. I'm even more concerned now, as is going along with Commissioner Barnes, about the chemicals that are used in the adhesive and the bonding element and what they might possibly pose. I just don't think this is needed, but I know it's not needed. And I think what we have there now is working really well. And I think that we need to, and again, if there was another place outside of the floodplain to do this, of course, as you said, it wouldn't come before us, so we wouldn't even be talking about it. You guys would do it, and that's great. And that's where that stuff maybe belongs, but not in the floodplain, and not in a place that is working right now. So given that, I think really we'd be doing a favor to everyone to just not proceed with something like this in this place with the impacts it's going to have. Thank you.
Commissioner Combs.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Rich or Mark, this is a safety-driven application. Is that correct, given the current facility? This is to improve the playground facility and the surfacing for safety reasons first and foremost? And what is the issue with the safety rating of the wood carpet versus the new surfacing?
I can speak to the technical specifications. Mark can speak to PRCS standards and maybe incident reports at PRCS facilities, et cetera. Per the Consumer Product Safety Commission Public Playground Safety Handbook, loose fill surfacing like wood chips are only rated for a fall height up to 10 feet, and that includes designed pad sites and then rooftops because kids climb up on everything. The port in place, the port in place is certified for, I think, up to 18 feet, although it's 18 to 20 feet. I don't have the exact number in here. So the reality is what's existing on site right now, you can see some of those rooftops, some of the top of those slides as well in excess of 10 feet. The newly designed facility and the equipment that's proposed has surface types and has place surfaces and rooftops that exceed 16 to 18 feet in height, similar to this. And frankly, the county would be putting themselves in a poor position to not meet the CPSC standards for safeties and fall heights on their facilities.
Thank you. So I can appreciate the concern regarding the environmental impacts here, given though that we've got a no-rise certification on floodplain, and above all else, this is a safety improvement. This is an easy issue for me to recommend approval on, and so I therefore can't support the motion.
Commissioner Miller.
Yeah. the alternatives here, if we go ahead and forward a recommendation of denial and the board approves of that, approves of denial, then what happens here is this facility would eventually be closed to public use because its safety would deteriorate to the point that it was not, we could not let members of the community use it. Correct? I mean, if
It would be determined unsafe, yeah, we would close it.
right, we would close it. So then, if we're worried about the environment, where we're going to have to haul ourselves out to other parts of the county, we got a $100 million facility, I don't know, 20 minutes away from this one coming up at Hanson. Since this park was installed, the population of Loudon County has doubled. We constantly hear from here and from the board that we have a lack of active rec opportunities in Loudon County and in the eastern part more specifically. So I think that recommending the board let a park like this deteriorate to the point that it can't be used serves no purpose to the general health welfare of the county. Additionally, I know we talked about environmental impacts and perhaps changing the mulch bark out every 2 years instead of every 10 or 15 years with the rubberized product. I don't know how the diesel vehicles that the county uses to haul the mulch back and forth pollutes the air any more than doing that every 6 months, 8 months, 2 years. So while I can appreciate some may want everything to go back to ground and back to nature, we have 425,000 people in this county that have a lot of kids that want to go and play and enjoy a park, and it's a responsibility of ours to make sure that those facilities are safe and adequate for them to use without liability to the county or risk to those involved that use them. So with that, I cannot support this motion.
Okay. I'm going to go real quick and then I'll come to you. Okay. Now, I know I had a number of questions and comments about the material when during the last round before we took the motion. However, I just don't think that we need to out and out deny it, but I don't like it the way it is. I was, my personal position is that I haven't heard enough to feel supportive of the safety conversation. We have the same material on the ground at my daughter's elementary school in Waterford and many of the schools in Loudon. I don't go to enough parks department playgrounds as I do schools, because I go to a lot of tennis courts, and then the schools are near the tennis courts we go to. But I go all around D.C., and I know that those materials are down there, meaning the wood blankets, and and they kind of intermingle. Some of them had the pour in place, some of them have the wood blankets. The elementary schools, the junior highs, usually the older grades, the junior highs have that more durable material, not the little kids. But my issue is I haven't heard enough to really, get behind the whole safety issue. But more than anything, I think that there could be another material that might be more environmentally compatible. And I'd like to just hear more from you in terms of, is there another material out there? Now, I talked about building playgrounds, but I haven't done it since 2011. So I'm hoping that there may have been something that has happened since 2011 that I don't know anything about. Have you come across any other materials in your research? Because this is the same thing that we were pouring in 2007 and 2008. Is there anything else out there that might be a little bit more environmentally friendly? I get it that you don't want to continue with the wood blankets, but this is basically just ground up tires. So I'm not in favor of denying it or just sending you, I'm not in favor of that. And I don't like the idea of just, but maybe we just, give you time to go to another work session. Maybe you come back with a different approach if you think you can. So I'm really asking you to respond to me if there's some other material you think you can bring into the conversation or not. I know I'm not really supposed to ask you questions, but I keep things very informal in a work session. If this was a public hearing, I wouldn't talk across the dais like this.
I think, speaking for PRCS, when you're evaluating all the options for safety surfaces, there are multiple criteria. Safety being one of them, which we've spoken at length, environmental sensitivity is another, durability is another, cost is another, et cetera. And as PRCS, as part of their due diligence in evaluating all the options for surfaces and weighing all those factors, including at a site like this that isn't located in the floodplain at Potomac Lake Sportsplex, has come to this as checking the most boxes. And that's why it's become the standard for PRCS moving forward, why it's been selected here at this location. So I'm not sure that I fully answered your question, but if you go through the entire checklist of parameters for safety surfacing and what works best for the county on their facilities, this is where we are.
Well, I guess the reason I'm making this plea is because I don't want to see this denied tonight. And somehow I hear you saying that this will be the standard, and I saw DC and many cities go to this, as I mentioned, over a decade ago, and I know why, and I support it in general. I can't imagine that all these other sites are floodplains, though. So I'm wondering if there's a way to, are they?
Well, so what I was going to say is, your choices are a wood chip surface or something synthetic. The synthetic can be a loose type, variable surface, right? A recycled material type surface that doesn't have the adhesive poured over it, things of that nature, or wood chips. You're not designing playgrounds anymore with just natural turf grass, correct? Anything that you put in there would be synthetic. It could be an astroturf with a cushioned, underlayer, et cetera. There are a lot of options. But it sounds like to me the commission's concerns are about environmental, specifically in this location, and there's not another surface that isn't going to be made of synthetic materials. So I feel like no matter what we came back with, we'd be getting back to the concerns of this is synthetic, it's not biodegradable in the same category as wood chips, and I don't know that we would appease these concerns. But as I stated earlier, when you're factoring all the different characteristics that you're evaluating for a play surface, this is the best solution for this facility.
And your major concern with the wood chips on this one is safety, but we know there's also an economic component as well that's not really being highlighted. Is that fair to say?
Safety, maintenance, cost, all of that.
All of that. Okay, and that's fair, Okay. Commissioner Frank, is there a light on? Okay.
Yes, if you could indulge me for just a second.
Absolutely.
And you guys may not know this, but I just am trying to confirm something. Using the poured-in-place rubber surface, is that eligible for LEED credits? Is that what I'm reading? I mean, somebody's claiming this, and you believe everything you read on the internet, but, I mean, is it that's an interesting perspective if it's true. I didn't know if you guys knew either way, if that's actually.
Yeah, I don't know off the top of my head, but certainly there are LEED criteria that call for the use of recycled materials, et cetera. I don't know that the counties are trying to seek LEED certification on this specific playground or facility.
I'm just, if you're looking at it as, I mean, that's usually, anyway, I'll let people read into that what they want. I'm just curious. I mean, yeah, we've all our cars drive on tires. If it truly is recycling rubber, then it offsets somewhere, right? I mean, it's like the discussion people always have with disposable diapers versus cloth, okay, but you're still using water, electricity, cars, I mean, nothing is without impact, I guess is what I'm saying. So we have to pick and choose. All right, thank you. I just wanted to know about the lead thing.
Okay. We got Commissioner Vance.
Yeah, I lean toward you, Mr. Chairman, and wishing we didn't deny it, but also had an opportunity to explore some alternatives to it. What I'm hearing from Commissioner Kirschner is there's a fondness for the park as it is among the community. So was that taken into consideration? Was there outreach to the community to see if they would prefer to have the park upgraded, to have the synthetic material put in place, as opposed to the natural materials that are there now in a more natural setting? It is a floodplain, so that's one of my concerns in trying to decide how to vote on this. You mentioned that the park would be closed if it didn't have if this didn't happen.
The park, not the park itself, the playground.
The playground.
Let me clarify that, yeah. The playground would be shut down due to safety concerns.
Because of the fall factor?
Well, because of the material that's currently there, it's past its longevity, and the material now, we're upgrading to a more safer product.
So there's no alternative to the rubberized material at this point?
I think the alternative is the wood chips, which don't meet the safety criteria.
Okay, and they wouldn't meet the safety criteria because of the height of the
Yes.
structures? Okay. Perhaps the structures don't need to be as high as you're proposing. I mean, could that be an alternative?
It could be, but I will say that of all the playgrounds that we've been replacing, what you see up there is what they're expecting back. They want a lot of opportunity to do different things. So every 4 or 5 years, you'll see the playground manufacturer and coming up with newer products, and we're just trying to keep the pace. You could see what was done over at in Sterling, the one we replaced over there. I just forgot the name of the park. But anyway, that was the original wood one, if you all remember, and then it went through a couple gyrations of different playground. What's there today is if you go there on a Saturday, it's just the most utilized area for the playground. This one is heavily used, is the one in Trailside is heavily used as well. So these are very sought out playgrounds because of the different apparatus.
All right. Yeah, I just want to respect the community's wishes and kind of respect what they may feel is acceptable to them. So, thank you.
Commissioner Barnes, and then
I'll
we're going to
be
go to
done
a
after
vote.
this. This is my last talk.
Okay.
I think the community that planning commissioner lives in the community, they know that community better than any other person. I don't know what Ms. Kirshner's community wants, because she is there and she talks to the community. And that's why I always try to respect when a commissioner makes the judgment on their place, to respect that. Nobody knows better than her, because she's in the community. She talks to the people, and that's where she lives. And on top of that, I think she is also environmental. That's your job, right? I don't know. So any commissioner that lives in the community, they know better, because they see it. They go down and they're interested in there. So that's why I like to respect also the commissioner's wishes that live there, and they know more about it than I do. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Kirshner, do you have a closing?
Yes, thanks, Mr. Chair. I did not want to bring a motion of denial, and I would have liked to have seen some sort of a compromise that shows more sensitivity to this unique location and in the floodplain and the impacts, and even some of the suggestions that were made, maybe, shorter equipment. So I guess I'll ask again, is there anything you think you can go back and come back with maybe something that might bridge some of these issues?
So you're asking us to come back with alternative to the heights and the design of the playground?
Potentially, yeah, to address the issues we talked about.
I'm sorry?
Yes.
Okay.
To address the issues we talked about. They were all brought up by various commissioners.
I mean, we could look at it, but I will say that, again, what you see there is pretty much what the community is expecting in replace. What we have shown, we haven't picked the final, colors and things, but I know for a fact that when we've upgraded these other facilities, they are asking, and I have not gone out and asked anyone that's been playing there, but I do know when we go to the sites, this one in particular is heavily used, and they like what's there, and knowing that they're going to get an improved facility similar to what's there is what I think they're looking for. But, that's just my perspective coming from Parks and Recreation is we try to provide them with expectations that are equal to what's in the other playgrounds of this size.
And I would love, and like I said, I've talked to a lot of the community members and understand the people that are there. I haven't heard anybody say they expect or want what is in Briar Patch. It's a very different place. And the one thing I did ask, last time to work with you to talk about these things and see if we come up with something. So, Marshawn, is that something? Could we?
I just would like to clarify the heights. The expectation is that they lower the heights and come up with an alternative surface material.
And looking at if there are some alternatives to maybe the configuration of the surfaces, maybe part of it is there's a smaller portion that requires a synthetic surface or something like that. Thank you for your indulgence, Mr. Chair.
Okay. So what are we doing? Are we going to?
Well, I'm asking if they're agreeable to it.
Mr. Chairman, hold on. They're having I'm sorry, they're having a sidebar about it.
Yeah, that's okay.
Okay. My fingers are crossed. Come on, guys. It's okay. It's a work session.
So Commissioner Kirchner, I'll answer your question. Since the public hearing, we met, talked, evaluated the different options and the suggestions that you had, and it kind of was summarized periodically throughout some of our conversations and the responses to the questions we heard. And respectfully, we'd ask for action this evening. As we said, if we come forward with an alternative, it's going to be another synthetic type surface. It is not going to be wood chips, and I feel we'll just have the same conversation again. That's what we need to do in order to meet the standards for the national safety criteria as well as PRCS master plan criteria, et cetera.
Okay, or not coming. I'm okay.
So I'm saying we've taken that time since we did hear the comments, and we tried to evaluate ways in order to make changes to the application, and that's why we came forward without being able to make other changes.
Okay, yeah, and I think just last thing, and then we can go to the vote, Mr. Chair. As far as I'm concerned, what I asked it last time, and I'd hoped, and I reached out, and I never heard from anybody between the public hearing and tonight, which I was kind of disappointed. Never heard back from Parks and Rec or from yourself, but is to look at maybe a different configuration. Maybe parts of the playground would be the synthetic, and parts would still be utilizing the wood chips. Coming up with something creative, something that instead of just having a boilerplate template that's done everywhere else. So it's too bad that we couldn't maybe have that conversation. I think we'd have a better outcome, and I don't like recommending denial, but I feel like that based upon what's presented now, I want to stick with that. So thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Okay, so the motion is laid upon the table. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed?
Nay.
Nay.
So the nays have it. So they were four for it, so there's a 4-5. And those against were Commissioner Miller, Frank, Vice Chair Salmon, Commissioner Combs, and Commissioner Merrithew. Do I hear another motion? Commissioner Miller.
Thank you. I move the Planning Commission forward specs 2021-0001 Potomac Lakes Playground to Board of Supervisors with a recommendation of approval, subject to the conditions of approval dated April 6, 2022, and based on the findings for approval provided attachments 1 and 2 to the June 9, 2022 Planning Commission work session memorandum.
Second.
So,
Okay. Commissioner Miller, do you have an opening?
I do.
Well, I'm sorry. Commissioner Miller makes the motion, properly seconded by Commissioner Combs. Now, Commissioner Miller, do you have an opening?
I do. Thank you. I have full faith that Mark and the group at Parks have done the evaluation necessary to determine that the material they want to put in this park is the right thing for us. And I base that judgment on the fact that we are in the process of finishing up Hanson Park. Hanson Park is being built with a $100 million budget, which is essentially an unlimited amount of money to spend on the very best possible thing they can do, and this is what they have chosen. While I understand, as Commissioner Barnes said, deference to the district supervisor in something like this, I also give deference to the man that has been running parks for the last involved in parks for the last 20 years here in the county and 30 years beyond that. I fully and completely trust Mr. Brittingham and their work in studying safety standards. This is what we need to make sure that this active recreation in this park can continue to be used by the community. A failure to act here will cause a further deterioration of not just the wood chips and the underlayment, but the facility, the system, the playground itself. And the last thing we want is to have a rotting playground that has to be removed and no one can use it. This is what happens when you have tens of thousands of people in a neighborhood going to use a facility on a regular basis because they want the active rec that we so desperately want to provide, and here we are providing to them and telling them, no, we're going to take it away from you because it's not safe. We don't want that. We want safe playgrounds, safe active rec for the community to use and enjoy. This is the way we're going to get there over time, and I'm glad to support it. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. Other comments, debate? Okay. So you got a closing? All right. Those, the motion is laid upon the table. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed?
Nay.
Nay.
So the ayes have it. That would be 6-3 with Commissioner Barnes, Commissioner Vance, and Commissioner Kirshner opposed.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
They gotta go.
Let's take my victory and run. Okay, next on our agenda for the evening, ZMAP 2021-0007, ZMOD 2021-0025, ZMOD-2021-0026, ZMOD-2021-00027, and ZMOD-2021-0028, Innovation Multifamily. The project manager, Ms. Jackie Marsh. Jackie,
Good evening,
Good
Chair
evening.
Hayes and Planning Commission. I will provide a brief update to the commission on this item. I'll just reorient the commission. The subject site is located north of Innovation Avenue, directly west of Fairfax County and east of Route 28. The entire subject site is 7.8 acres, and as we mentioned at the public hearing, the applicant is only rezoning 4.8 of those acres. The applicant is seeking to rezone the property, to rezone it to the Planned Development Town Center zoning district in order to develop 415 multifamily attached dwelling units. The applicant is also proposing several zoning modifications to the PDTC zoning district, a parking reduction, reductions in tree canopy requirements, and reduction in building and parking setbacks, and reductions in buffer requirements. Following the Planning Commission public hearing, the applicant submitted revised materials to staff, and after reviewing these materials, staff continues to have outstanding issues with the transportation commitments in the proffer statement, and those specifically relate to the Davis Drive reservation and dedication, the timing of pedestrian facilities, the location of the bus shelter, and regional road and transit contributions. Staff did meet with the applicant this week to go over some additional clarifications, and I do have representatives from DTCI on the line if we have more, or if the commission would have more detailed questions about the transportation issues. The outstanding issues with the application have remained. The use mix does not align with the urban transit center place type recommendations. The development is deficient in open space and civic space. As I mentioned, we have transportation issues. We have outstanding fiscal issues, and staff cannot support the applicant's zoning modifications. Staff does not support this application, and we would recommend the commission forward a recommendation of denial to the Board of Supervisors. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Commissioners, questions? Commissioner Frank.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Jackie, the Davis Drive issue, do we not have that resolved? There's not 126 feet in a proffer?
We were looking for some additional language in the proffer statement about dedication and reservation. So we don't have that specific language in the proffers now, but when we met with the applicant on Monday afternoon, they did verbally agree that they would update the proffers to meet our recommendations.
Everybody at the other end of the table is nodding, so I'll let that go. Innovation Avenue. I almost want to apologize to everybody for getting into the weeds on this, but I will, and we may need Marie or Lou to weigh in. I understand that we have multiple applications in this immediate area that are multiple points in the process of, being reviewed, the legislative process. This is just one. The alignment of Innovation Avenue, that is currently included and entitled in the hub application that was approved about 10 years ago?
Yes, and the hub performed work. They realigned Innovation Avenue.
Okay, all right, so that is entitled and done. That is the precursor to what we now call Ravana. Does the, and the waterside area application, but does the Ravana application, and again, there's too many moving parts at different points, so I'm confusing everybody, I'm sure, but hopefully not. Does the Ravana application include any proposed changements to the alignment of Innovation Avenue as it stands right now?
I'm going to let Marie Pham from DTCI answer that. She's our expert with the Ravana application and this subject application. So she's on the line. I'll let her speak.
Good evening, Commissioner Frank. To answer your question, yes, Ravana is proposing to relocate one of their entrances onto Innovation Avenue slightly further west. And so that's been a concern partly with this application.
So the two applications at different points in the process do not have the same, I mean, the road itself doesn't move or realign. It's just we're talking about entrances and exits and access points that don't mesh up between the two.
That's correct.
Okay.
Innovation Avenue is already realigned.
Right.
The applicant, the Ravana applicant, they already did that work. So it's the access points that are moving.
It's the access points. Okay. All right, that's all I have right now. Thank you.
Commissioner Miller.
I want to ask a follow-up question to Commissioner Frank's question, and that is, as it relates to Ravana and this application in Davis Drive, if access points to Ravana are moved, but we'd still have to have, Davis Drive doesn't dead end at Innovation, it crosses through, correct?
That's the way it's proposed right now on the CTP, yes.
So then what is moving of Ravana's access points, as long as the Davis Drive access point stays right there at an intersection? I'm missing what the problem with Innovation then becomes.
Right, and to be clear, Commissioner Miller, we have two separate access points for Innovation Multifamily that line up with Ravana and that have essentially full access where you could drive from one development across Innovation into
So
the
the
other
Davis Drive
development.
one is still there. It's the other one the one
Drive,
further
right.
west that Ravana would want to be moving out of alignment with Innovation.
That's correct.
Should this application go forward and become the first one in, shouldn't we then have to go back to Ravana and say, well, you need to? Why are we, so in other words, we're holding an application that's further along to a standard that an application that may never get approved would need? I'm a little confused in the context of relating the applications, because while I understand we are considering one application, I think we have a duty to consider everything that's around it at the same time, at least take into consideration the things that are around it. So wouldn't we need to go back
Commissioner Miller, we're not making this an outstanding issue for this Greystar application. This is something that staff needs to work on with both applicants, but it is an issue that has come up that we need to work on. We don't have a resolution to it because we have two different developers proposing two different access points.
Gotcha. Okay, I see.
So it's
not an issue with Innovation per se.
well, it is. It's an issue for both of these applications, for Ravana and for the subject application for tonight.
Right, and to be clear, we've raised this with both the Ravana rezoning application as well as their CPAP application, and we've raised it here with Innovation Multifamily with their rezoning as well as with their site plan application.
So then I guess it would be fair to say then that if the way to resolve this, and there's lots of issues with both the applications, but to resolve this issue, would we not have to satisfy both applications simultaneously and essentially have the board approve them simultaneously? Because if they come together and say, yeah, we'll put it right here, and everyone meets up and they're happy, and Innovation comes in and gets approved, and a year and a half later, Ravana says, no, we're changing our application. The only way to ensure that those access points line up is if both applications are working together, in which case,
And so those are the comments we've been making to both applicants during this process. We've been saying to both of them, please coordinate this together. We haven't gotten there yet.
And I appreciate it, but my question is, how do we get them to coordinate when they're seemingly a year apart?
This is something we continue to work with both applicants on. I don't have an answer. Like when you say, how do we? We just keep meeting until we have a resolution.
Okay.
Commissioner Miller, can I provide some clarity to the issue?
Sure.
So we've had multiple discussions with Ravana. We've had multiple discussions with DTCI staff and Jackie. We have proposed what has been requested of us from DTCI staff for Davis Drive, if we just want to start with Davis Drive. So Davis Drive in the countywide transportation plan calls for 70 feet of right-of-way. We provided that, and then we were requested to provide more. We provided 105 feet of right-of-way. That still was not enough for DTCI, so we upgraded to 126 feet, which is what we provided at the public hearing. we have provided two different options to DTCI staff, which we discussed with them earlier this week for Davis Drive, that aligns us with the Rivanna to the south, all within the 126 feet. This road is years, if not decades, away from being fully designed. What we are showing to staff is that within that 126 feet of right-of-way, they can have everything that is needed for that road to be successful through there. So we are fully aligned with Rivanna to the south.
What about in the west?
So the west is a bit of a different story because there's been a change that was requested by Rivanna. There's an existing median break in place on Innovation Avenue. It was part of the original design. We originally lined up with that entrance. We had two entrances into our garage. We lined up with that entrance. Rivanna proposed to move that entrance further to the west. So then we had to remove that entrance from the garage, and we moved our entrance further to the west to try to align with it. It doesn't quite align, but there is an option for Rivanna to move theirs a little further to the west to align with our entrance. There's also other options in terms of access management exceptions, which Grady and Rich can probably speak to better than me, which could resolve the issue from that perspective. So it's not as if there are not options here to resolve this. They're very resolvable. It's just a matter of these are also very preliminary discussions at this time.
Okay. While I have the mic, another question for Jackie about the application itself. I've long been concerned with saying in mixed use that every parcel can't be mixed use. It can't accommodate everything, and that's one of the concerns here. This application is 7 or 8 acres, but 2 acres is on the east side of Davis Drive that they're not proposing to do anything with. It's just like, here we own it, but it's there. We'll put a little tree save there, but we're not going to zone it for anything. Whatever happens in the future happens in the future. If they had come and proposed a 10,000 square foot strip pad with some maybe some offices over top of it, and told us that they had a dry cleaner and an ethnic restaurant and a nail salon, would that satisfy
If they were proposing the appropriate amount of non-residential development with the residential development that met the use mix recommendations of the place type, then staff could support something like that.
Okay, but so there's not, even if they wanted to do that on that property, there wouldn't be enough to meet the mix requirement.
There could be.
Change their building.
There could be.
Okay. All right. That's all I have for now.
No? You got to think it through? Okay. Mr. Romeo, did you want to add something? You look like you.
Mr. Chairman, we do have a presentation. We can show you an update on what we've done with the application and kind of run you through some of these issues that staff has mentioned.
Only if you really want to. It's a work session. You don't have to.
Yeah, we would appreciate it. I think it would add some background and color to the application. And I'll start at slide 10 to help abbreviate things if that's helpful for the commission.
Would 5 minutes make you happy?
That'd be fine, yes.
Okay. Go right ahead.
Thank you. If we could pull the presentation up, that'd be great.
Can the assistant secretary? Yeah, we need to. Yeah.
Is the vice chairman the timekeeper now?
Right.
Okay.
Okay.
All right, so this is the summary of all the application revisions that we've made since the public hearing. The main one is the linear park. This essentially killed 4 birds with 1 stone. It allowed us to fully count on the 4.98 acres open space and civic space separately. We committed to this sheet as a proffered sheet. It's effectively our landscape plan now, sheet 12 of the plan set. And it gave us front-facing public open space. Our entire frontage along the building is now public open space that can be used by anybody that's walking by or part of the building. We already talked about Davis Drive. The bus shelter option, we provided an option west of Davis Drive. We still retain the option east of Davis Drive. We think that's the best location for it, but we gave an option to staff within the right-of-way on the west side. We can still work through that issue. It's not unresolvable. We've already submitted a crosswalk study. This is unique for this application. There's a site plan already in process for this application. We have submitted the crosswalk study to VDOT. We're expecting comments back in the next month or so. And we fully expect to be approved for crosswalks across the site, which is important because it gives us direct access to an existing shared use path, which leads us right to the metro station. I'm not going to go through all of these, but one of the other ones I wanted to mention was the stormwater management. We've agreed to a manufactured treatment device that will remove a pound of phosphorus before it goes off the site. That's an important environmental feature that NRT was appreciative of, that Rich and his staff at Dupre was able to work through. Next slide, please. So this is the landscape plan showing the entire frontage being now committed to as open space. This is, again, more of an urban type open space. We still retain the courtyards. We still retain all the other internal features such as the micro market and the co-working space as civic features, but we now have a great open space front door to this site. The next two slides are just close-up, so we can go through those pretty quickly. Jackie, if you just want to move forward to the next slide. This is just the east side. Again, well-quality design there for the sidewalks, benches, gathering places. Next slide, please. We have an activity lawn as well. We have a 10-foot wide shared use path along the entire frontage. If you go out there today, all the residents of Dulles Green, which are out there by themselves today, they walk along the shared use path along the south side of Innovation. It's their recreation. This will be a path on the north side. It really will be a nice public space for people. Next slide, please. So this is the recalculation of the open space. The linear park is just under half an acre. That in and of itself meets the open space standards within the plan. We have common open space, which staff does not count, but would count under the current ordinance. So we technically have 1 acre of open space on that site, and we would only take credit for 0.49 acres according to the plan. All the uses listed on the bottom there are civic space that staff has agreed are civic space. We're over twice the amount of required civic space according to the plan. If you go to the next slide, please. So in total, we have about 36% open space on the entirety of the site. This includes the area to the east of Davis Drive. Staff has not given us credit for the tree conservation area, which is also half an acre in the middle of the urban policy area. We are well over on open space, whether you look at just the 4.98 acres or the entirety of the almost 7-acre site. Next slide, please. So when you look at the urban transit center place type, I wanted to kind of back up and show all the items that we do meet within the place type. We are a core use of multifamily residential within the place type. We are well over the FAR minimum of 1.4 FAR. We have a building height that's minimum of 6 stories. These are the major bulk standards in addition to the structured parking that you would expect in the urban transit center place type. We also have shallow setbacks along Innovation Avenue. Even with those shallow setbacks and all the easements in that area, we're able to add the linear park along the frontage. We have amenities that include sidewalks, street trees, street furniture, shade trees, bike racks, crosswalks, plaza. We have a bike room even on this property, and our open space, civic space do exceed the plan minimum requirements. Next slide, please. So the kind of the core issue here is whether or not we meet the plan policy. And we've included information, so I think it's page 32 of your packet, which goes through how we believe we meet the standards. The top policy there, Quality Development Action 7.1, talks about allowing for modifications in the ordinance to meet the place type. That's effectively what we're doing. There's no good zoning district right now to implement the urban transit center place type. So we're using PDTC. We're having some modifications that are in line with that policy. Quality Development Action 7.1G talks about being less than 5 acres, and if you are, which is fairly unique for the urban transit center place type, then you don't necessarily have to meet the use mix standards to a T, and that's what we've been proposing all along. We do meet that standard when you look at the surrounding development. There's not a lot of surrounding development near us. We acknowledge that, but we do meet that standard. And once you meet that standard, you go to the Infill Policy Strategy 3.1. And what that says is, are you in conformance with the context of the surrounding development patterns? Well, there aren't much in the way of surrounding development today, but everything around us, we are completely surrounded by the urban transit center place type. This will become an urban transit center area. That is the goal for this. We are the catalyst for that. Not only are we meeting these place type standards, or the policies of the plan, we're also bringing infrastructure improvements to this site. The areas to the north of us are a bunch of chopped up parcels that have been overlooked for decades. We are going to be in a position to help those develop. We're going to bring the power and the water and the sewer closer to them. We're going to be taking advantage of the infrastructure improvements in Innovation Avenue and also bringing other things to the site which will help the properties around us. Next slide, please. Again, these are just some excerpts from the infill policies. It talks about the ability to be a complementary use, which we absolutely believe we are when Rivanna ever develops. We believe we'll be in a position to help them support their commercial and retail. One of the things I do want to mention, and this is kind of self-evident, the Dulles World Center, Waterside, I'm sorry, not Waterside, but the Hub, they've been approved for quite some time. They've gone through multiple approvals. What staff's position is that if we're not meeting the use mix on our site, then we cannot develop under the policies in the plan. However, if we had a 90-acre site, we could do that. We could provide all those different uses. For a site that's only 5 acres that has almost no ability to assemble with other properties around it, it's difficult to do that. We have a floodplain to the north and 2 large developments to the south and to the west. We are on our own out there, but we can serve as the catalyst to get this development going in this area. Next slide, please. These are just some close-ups of Davis Drive. We don't need to go into this too much unless you want to see the options that we presented to DTCI staff. But what you see there is also the half-acre tree conservation area. Again, that's something we've proffered to. We'll have a tree conservation area easement for that. Next slide, please. These are just the 2 options that we have showing that we would align with Davis Drive to the south on the Rivanna property. Next slide, please. And this is the second option that shows that. In case you have any specific questions, we'd be happy to answer those. So moving on to the final slide is just the conclusion. And we just want to be very clear that this is a project that's well-designed. It meets a majority of the standards of the place type. It's purely the use mix standard, which we cannot meet. But even if we were to do what Commissioner Miller suggested, if we were to come in with a commercial piece on the eastern side of Davis Drive, we would meet the place type standards. But we are trying to be as honest and straightforward as possible in this application. We're trying to give a project to the county that will address the lack of housing in the county. I just looked at the strategic plan for unmet housing needs. Since 2009, the vacancy rate for multifamily rental housing in Loudon County has been below 5%. There's a reason for that. There's not enough housing to support this. This is where the housing should go. It is in the perfect position within a 1/4 mile from Metro for residents to walk to the Metro. This is the ideal type of a use in this location at the right density in this place type. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Commissioner Combs.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just want to kind of flesh out the piece that Commissioner Miller mentioned. So if you were to put a pad of sorts over on the eastern side of the parcel, included in the rezoning area, and put, as you mentioned, a dry cleaner, ethnic restaurant, and a nail salon, and you got to a 80-20 mix, 80% residential use, 20% non-residential, does that meet?
I don't feel comfortable speculating about hypothetical, like, are you saying, like, would we, how would staff, like, would we support it?
I'm not asking you to commit to that. I'm just saying if they did that and they achieved a mix of 80-20, 80% residential, 20% non-residential, and I just need a reminder on what the policy is calling for. Is that a sufficient mix? It seems to be there's a range anywhere from 60-40 to 80-20, which might satisfy the policy on at least that mix of uses. Is that what policy supports?
Policy could support a higher percentage of residential versus non-residential, and the percentages that the place type recommends, I think it's up to 75% outside of the...
Outside of a 1/4 mile, it's up to 80% for residential, as low as 20% for non-residential, but also still requiring the 5% public civic. So it couldn't be purely 80-20.
Got it, okay. And so if they, let's say they include the eastern side of the parcel, right? There's a big constraint with respect to the Davis Drive right away. They include that, they achieve whatever the threshold of mix of uses is, and then they go and develop the residential on the western side and it's phased in such a way that allows that, but then somebody ultimately comes in and the area surrounds it is all developed with a mix of uses, and they say, well, we don't want to put non-residential there anymore on that eastern portion. How would they come back in and
They could either,
accommodate that then, maybe given the new uses in the adjacent areas would allow for that to then be developed as residential? How could they come back in and do that?
they could
Is there
just do a
method for that?
ZCPA or a ZMAP to rezone it. Well, no, I guess if they rezone the entire thing to PDTC and they wanted to convert commercial land to residential, they could just do a ZCPA.
That would be the vehicle for
Yeah.
doing that. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Thank you.
Commissioner Miller.
So I want to, I wish we had a better format for maybe, I wish we had like the committee of the whole or something, but I really want to more make a comment than ask a question. Although I do have one comment to the applicant, which is, in the current format, while I appreciate saying that the 2 acres on the east side of Davis is open space, it's really not, because you're not proffering to make it open space forever. Our conversations are that you could one day build a building on it, and so we can't count it open space today and not tomorrow.
It is true, everything except for the 0.52 acre tree conservation area. We are committing to
Right,
that.
that you
in our
are,
process.
yes.
Yes,
Right,
yes.
right. But one of the things that as this goes through the conversation, I don't know what the right venue is for me to bring this up, so I'm going to do it now. And that is to consider this, and some of the objections I think I've heard, and in some individual conversations, is if this application was proposed 10, 15, or 20 years from now, would your opinion or vote on this project be different? In other words, if you're a no today, but this came to us in 15 years when everything around it started to develop, would your opinion of the project change purely as a function of time? And so I just want people to consider that as we go through this, because the notion is that we're saying if it was 15 years from now and other things were coming around, we would be for it, then maybe it meets a need, it gets the housing we want near Metro, and if Greystar is willing to carry the load, it's their money. And if people want to live here a quarter mile from the Metro with no services around them, okay, that's up for them. I may not want to live there, but I apologize, Mr. Chairman, for the nature of how I'm bringing this up. It's hard for us to bring up things for others to consider. We're not, because we can't have more than 2 of us together talking about anything. So I just wanted to bring that up in the hopes that others think about that as we go through the rest of this discussion.
Commissioner Kirshner.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have a question, 2 questions. One on the linear park. So that's really caught my attention with that. Probably not surprised. And I really love the idea of having this idea of having park and recreation space that's open for public use. But if I'm reading this correctly, you're talking about a 10-foot wide shared use path, and then the entire width of the linear park is 14 feet?
No, I believe it's wider than 14 feet,
I
Rich.
just read, when I gotta get back to the page that
It's a variable width. The 10-foot shared use path is located within VDOT right-of-way, and then from the right-of-way to the building is anywhere from 20 to 24 feet in width. And so within that 20 to 24 feet in width on the subject property, there's various mounding, landscaping, trail networks. And I say trail networks, they are kind of consistent with the urban character of this design, consistent with the goals of the comprehensive plan architecturally. So there's pathways that connect from that asphalt, the multi-use trail, up to the building and then into the courtyard areas, et cetera.
So what's the average width from the edge of the path that's closest to the street and I guess the what this concept is that the open space area right up to the building
Sure.
is considered, right? Yeah, okay.
So, well, the question is the distance from the path. So from the path to the building is,
Outer edge of the path to the building.
it's about 25 feet. However, the tabulation that Mike shared briefly showed that it ends up being a half-acre linear park, but that does not count about 5 foot of the width and the 10-foot trail because that's in right-of-way. So you're almost doubling it when you count the effective impact of what that linear park truly, how it functions. But from how we can categorize the parkland on what we own versus what's VDOT right-of-way, that's the limitation at that half-acre number. But functionally, it's almost double in size.
Okay, and did you change from when we saw this before, did you change the design of the footprint to accomplish this?
The building footprint?
Right.
There was
on the land.
minor details in access and how those pathways connected with access to the facility.
Okay.
There was no significant changes to the actual building footprint.
Okay, and then my other question is having to do with the 600 square foot co-working space. So it's another thing that I know I talked about on the call. I'm really interested in seeing those types of amenities. I think that's sort of the way lifestyles are going, and I think that's something that we really should be really supportive of. But 600 square feet, how did you come up with that size? It seems small.
Commissioner Kershaw, I think we're kind of going through our design with our interiors group. I think we're working on those square footages as we speak. I think as we program the amenity space, which has over 20,000 square feet overall throughout the building, we look to make it a 24/7 kind of entertainment use for the residents. So, we may have a demonstration kitchen, but in there, that's where their coffee is, so they can work at the island in that kitchen space. We'll have dedicated co-working space. We use 600 square feet as almost like phone booth rooms and small offices that people can go in and take a phone call. But the idea of a co-working, as you now kind of think about it as open space where people come and meet, that's basically all the rest of the amenity space.
Okay. Yeah, I've been in several co-working spaces where they have different sized rooms, and then there is a little, like a cafe kind of a thing there. There's one right down in Denver that was really awesome. I went there. I actually attended a conference there, which was amazing. But it just, and I don't know why you're not looking at somehow integrating some sort of, food, restaurant. So, I'm saying, like, provide those services as opposed to just like a demonstration cooking kitchen, which might get you to.
We've also proffered like a mini mart, right? So we would have a vendor come in to stock things, almost like a little Amazon Go or something, so people can get the necessities that they need at the apartment complex. And so, those need for run out travel isn't necessarily as usual. So we try to provide those kind of necessities within the building, and so that it can be a 24/7 place and people don't have to commute.
Okay. All right. Great. Thanks.
Okay. Commissioner Merrithew.
Is the application still proposing to provide regional road and capital facilities contributions only for the market rate units?
Yes.
Is there any discussion about how that proposal translates to cost savings on the affordable units? In other words, the fact that you want to keep, the fact that you want to not have to pay regional road contributions for the affordable units because that'll help their affordability. That's been the argument. We're trying to make them as affordable as possible. But that money does not translate necessarily into actual affordability for those units or the unmet housing needs units in this case. So is there any means of translating that value into added affordability for those units so you could make them affordable to 50% AMI as opposed to 70 or something like that?
Yeah, so Commissioner Merrithew, we oftentimes, this is a typical issue we receive on a lot of applications, and What I would say is that the requirement for affordable housing for a multifamily elevator-served four-story unit is 0% in Loudoun County. We're providing 6.25% ADUs, which is the 30 to 50% AMI, and we're doing 3.75% from the 50% to the 80% AMI for the unmet housing needs units. That in and of itself costs money. The micro market, the co-working space, the bicycle room, all of these things do add up. There's not a direct comparison that I can provide to you that says, well, because we're not providing this much in terms of a contribution towards these units, we get X number of additional affordable units. All of the additional affordable units we're providing are above and beyond what's required and are in compliance with the policy. I have stated many times in many referrals that it's counterintuitive for the county, even if they're unmet housing needs units or AMPPUs, for them to charge a fee on top of something that the applicant is providing above and beyond the requirement. I think that's fundamentally incorrect way of doing things in the county, and I hope during the zoning ordinance rewrite that changes. It probably will anyway because the ADUs are going up in percentage, and the county exempts those from any contributions anyway, as they should. I think anything that's still within the affordability range in accordance with the strategic plan for unmet housing needs should be given that same level of consideration.
I agree and disagree with you on a couple of points, but my concern is not that you're getting or proposing the exemption for those units, but that exemption is not necessarily translating to direct affordability to those units. That's what I'm, in other cases, I hope I made that comment as well, that I think in all these cases where you're looking for an exemption, it should be translated directly back to affordability, and not because on the theory that all these other services are costing more money or what have you. And the other side of that is transportation, regional road funds are there because there's an impact, a transportation impact from the project, and there's a transportation impact from affordable units. That's a service need no matter what the price of the unit is. People drive. So I have a concern about that. The other comment I would make is that on this project, we have to look at what's going to be on the ground, what is on the ground in terms of services and amenities for these residents. How far do they have to go to school? They have to go north to Parkview to high school or what have you. And there's just absolutely nothing around this property now. And I think to suggest that you're meeting the plan policy because you're 5 acres, you can be a single use. That policy is tied to infill development, not to green fields in the middle of nowhere development with no amenities or services around it. And so I think it's been a misinterpretation of the plan policy to say that this fits that infill quality, because there's no development around this site. There's no guaranteed development around this site. We've known because we've had the hub, we've had the, Dulles World Center before that. So we've had 30 years of entitlement on this property and nothing happened. So we can't guarantee that what Rivanna does is actually going to happen. And so the infill is not the appropriate discussion for this particular use. I think the appropriate discussion is what are the services and amenities these people are going to enjoy in this area until something else happens. And I hate to approve a project. As much as I like the urban nature of this project, it needs an urban context, and it's premature because we don't have that at this point. I'm sorry, I'm turning into a dialogue as opposed to a question, so I'll stop right there. Sorry.
See?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear that.
I have a question, if you don't mind. So can you tell me a little bit about the funding structure for the project?
I'm happy to, Chairman Hayes. So our investors are qualified opportunity zone investors. So they come in and for a 10-year time frame.
Right.
And so the reason why they've invested in this project is because of the long-term view that the comp plan has set out for this. So they have patient capital to be that spearhead to see this urban place type build out. And so I already have my investors committed. We're already through our design development documents. We would go to construction documents in the next month. And so we have every intention of putting this into production by the end of the year, you know, pending everything going on here. And so very much so the counties and our investors in Greystar are aligned here to see this urban place type built out. And, you know, Dulles Green's been surviving there for years. You know, there's not like a magic wall between Loudon and Fairfax, you know, that's right down the block. And so housing can survive here. And then when the metro starts, this is how things start to gain momentum. And I think waiting for I'm sorry, now I'm going on a diatribe here. I hope I answered your question.
No, you did. So just so we're clear, I'll just make this statement. I got another question. The complexion of your project, if you will, the base building and the approach and the development program is exactly what I have been preaching and wanting to see near the metros for a long period of time. And you're close enough to be leading the pack. In fact, you're not quite as tall as I had hoped that a project like this would be, but you know, you're getting there. Tell me why you didn't decide to make this a mixed use and bring some of your own retail space to the project. I know it's premature to attract the users, but just to build in some boxes, just some space there for later.
We obviously could have done that. I think what you'd find, and you also think about when we started this project in the middle of COVID, right? Retail, small box retail is very much struggling.
Yep.
And so doing the token, this is our retail space, and have it sit vacant, it doesn't help you, it doesn't help the residents, it doesn't help us, right? So I think we really took a very laser approach on what would be successful here. And so, again, it kind of goes back to why haven't we entitled the other side of Davis Drive? I have 126 feet of right-of-way that I don't know what it looks like, right? We're trying to maintain as much flexibility for the county to be successful in this area as much as us. And so, you know, to have a real conversation about what would be successful, I don't know if that retail would be successful. And, you know, in my amenity space, like I said, we're trying to provide a lot of services. We have dry cleaning on site that come in and gets delivered. We have a package room so everyone's Amazon shipping can be stored safely. We have freezers and refrigerators so that Amazon Fresh can come and deliver their groceries. We'll have a coffee bar. We'll have the mini mart. We'll have spaces for people to work. We'll have spaces for people to work out. And to be honest, we have a fantastic layout of the building with tremendous outdoor space and pool amenities. People will want to live here. I'm sure of it. Do I know a retailer would want to be in that space? I'm just not that sure.
No, I'm not suggesting that they would today. I mean, it's struggling, and in many places across the county, where any new retail might cannibalize existing retail, and I'm also preaching that on a regular basis. So I'll just say this, and I'm going to leave it alone. Do you have any additional space on your site to build anything else? And the only reason I'm mentioning is I hate to always see all these projects where there's only private funding involved. You know, I also sit on the state housing commission. You know, Virginia Housing has resources to help a developer like you to put some retail space in place, even if it's not feasible that you might attract the users today. Or they will help you to attract the users as well. That's what the State Economic Development Shop, or let me bite my tongue, Mr. Reiser is here for, right? But avail yourselves of those services, right? You don't have to go it alone, right? That's my basic message here. You're bringing Opportunity Zone money. You're bringing a fantastic, development like this, but economic development shops and vehicles like the old BHDA, that's what that is there for, is to be your partner, right? Because I know that it's hard to make all this pencil if, you don't know that you can acquire a user in the near term, right? But that's what that public money is there for. I think that to the degree that you are creating a self-sufficient oasis, it is you and your investors' risk, and it's the incumbent upon you to, this is rental or is it, you gotta stabilize the building and manage it. If you don't, there's nobody up here. I'm not gonna lose any sleep. I'll take that back. I'm gonna lose sleep for you. I'm not gonna lose any money. So with that, Commissioner, do you have a motion?
I do, Mr. Chair. I move that the Planning Commission forward ZMAP 2021-0007, ZMOD 2021-0025, ZMOD 2021-0026, ZMOD 2021-0027, and ZMOD 2021-0028, Innovation Multifamily, to the Board of Supervisors with a recommendation of denial based on the findings for denial provided as Attachment 1 to the June 9th, 2022 Planning Commission Work Session Memorandum.
Second.
The motion by Commissioner Frank, properly seconded by Vice Chair Salmon. Commissioner Frank, do you have an opening?
I do, and Commissioner Merrithew, I wish I'd just recorded some of what you said, but while I appreciate the unit size limitations, the commitment to the Davis Drive right-of-way, the installation of electric vehicle charging stations, and I generally, because of some of that, would feel a bit better about the parking reduction that's being requested, which I know is still an outstanding issue for staff. It really comes down to, I'd feel better about that were the surrounding area further developed. We, as Commissioner Merrithew said, we have spent decades hoping, wishing, aspiring for this to develop a certain way, and it hasn't. And that's not something that we have complete control over, nor is it something that this applicant has a lot of control over, given the size of their parcel, which gets to the infill discussion and that policy. Chapter 2-17 of the 2019 General Plan addresses infill projects, and it says their development should complement or complete a larger development area and leverage existing capacity. The roads don't exist. The retail and the shopping doesn't exist. The employment centers don't exist, so there is no existing capacity. It isn't there today. As much as we all want to wish it to be there, and I think most of us do, it isn't. And it may not be for a very long time. So really, and here's where I was going with my road question, because this kind of was brought to my attention in recent days, and it really was kind of made the point about the timing thing, to Commissioner Miller's point. I would not answer your question with a yes, I'd be fine with it in 5, 10, 15 years, because it depends. Depends on what's happened around it. You can't be an infill policy, an infill, to me it's just completely contrary to being treated as an infill parcel and application when we are then going to have the surrounding area and folks butting heads and disagreeing over the infrastructure that you're supposed to be fitting in around. You know, we don't, it just sort of illustrated the point that I'm not sure this is an infill parcel. And so to treat it as such and give it the benefit of letting it have a single use, of relaxing some restrictions from the plan and those policies, and then let it toe the line in other areas. I just wasn't comfortable with that policy exception. So it really comes down to there needs to be a little bit more maturity in the area, I think, before we make that. It took me back to this is such an important key location in the county's plan, just like we've decided to stand by the policy that data centers or other things don't belong in this immediate area if we can avoid it. I don't think we need to deviate from other policies yet. We may get there. Things may happen around it. We may end up with a whole lot of different things there that aren't what we planned. So, unfortunately, at this point, I hope in 3 years I'm wrong, but knowing what we know now, I can't support moving this forward with a recommendation.
Okay. Anyone else? Commissioner Salmon.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm going to echo a lot of what Commissioner Merrithew said, just the second half, not the first half. But really, and I told the applicant this, I think this is a great infill product. I think it's a great project when there's other resources around it, and at this point, there just aren't other resources around it. I just think it's a little early. I appreciate you wanting to come in early. I just don't think it really meets what we need at this point. I hope it will soon, but we just don't know. With 3 applications on one property to the south of you, that could turn into something completely different for whatever reason, and then this becomes a problem, just like other communities that we've approved in the past that have become a problem because they're right next to commercial areas. And there's complaints from the residents because they're near a commercial area in an area designed for commercial, and the county let a residential thing happen there. That hopefully won't happen here, but we don't know. And because of that, I'm going to be in favor of the denial and recommend the denial. Thank you.
Commissioner Combs.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I've really wrestled with this one. When it came to public hearing initially, I thought there's just no merit in even sending it to work session. The land use issue can't change. We can't work on that because presenting as an infill type of application, you just can't improve that in time. I really appreciate the application. I appreciate the risk that the applicant is taking in trying to advance this. I also appreciate the desired flexibility in trying to really hone the tip of that spear and coming in here, surgically putting this here. I think our policies are such, though, that there needs to be a broader approach to include a mix of uses that can find policy support. I can't reason through the quality development and then infill goals, strategies, and actions to get there on this. I think if perhaps, and there are enormous site constraints here, I wish we had more time to work with it to explore what a mix of uses, a sufficient mix of uses that includes the entire site could do to get the policy support to move this forward. I would be really in favor of doing that. Short of it, I can't get there, and I wish I could. It's a really nice application, and I think it's eventually, should time and circumstances allow, be a wonderful project. I wish I could support it now, and I can't. I'm sorry.
Commissioner Merrithew.
I just want to say that, my concerns about the project aside for a second, I think it is a good project, but as has been stated here, it's not a project that is going to drive the mix of uses that are needed in this area because of its, and that we want in this area because of its proximity to Metro and so on. It's a project that will benefit from the larger projects around it. And for that reason, I think it's premature. We need to make sure those larger projects become a reality, and then sites like this will fit in, and densities like this will be very desirable. So it's not the project itself as much as it is the timing and the premature nature of the project. So I'm going to be supporting the motion as well. I'd also say that I do think we're putting a lot of emphasis on proximity to Metro when the Metro stations are going to work because there is activity around them and mix of uses around them. And so I think I'm very concerned about how long this site would go as a standalone project with no services, no amenities for the residents. And I don't think that's something we need to consider now. It's not something that we need to set up at this point. So I'll support the motion.
Commissioner Miller, did you have something else to say?
Just I haven't spoken to the motion yet, so yes, thank you.
You said you haven't?
I have not.
Oh, go right ahead.
Motion yet. Thank you. This is certainly, I see where this is going. This is not a hill I'm going to impale myself on at all, but I do want to comment on something that one of the commissioners said, and that is the context of this site with the ones around it that have yet to be developed. I would only ask that my colleagues remember that and take that to heart when considering other applications. When I was not here at a previous meeting, same idea was not held to that standard, and a project was considered without consideration to the parcels next to it that were under application. So I think it would be nice to have a little bit more consistency with that. So if we're going to truly plan, that we can't just consider every individual parcel. We should consider it with everything that's coming around it. And so I would hope that for future applications that I would agree with. I think it was Commissioner Salmon that made that comment. I would agree that we should look at applications in the context of some of the other things that are coming around it. So that is all. Thank you.
Oh, Commissioner Kirchner.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I have a little different take. I'm sort of, my concerns focus on, I was initially really excited to see Linear Park, and then when I found out that it's really just sort of a restating of what you already have there, it was a little bit disappointing. And I would agree with staff that portions of the area are located in required buffer spaces, and so really the entirety of it really doesn't qualify for open space, but I think it was a really great concept. And if I'd seen, when I asked the question, if you've changed the footprint and you haven't, if I'd really seen a change there, that was something I really could have gotten behind, actually, because I like a lot of the things that are happening here. As I expressed, I like what you're doing, like with the looking at this sort of the way people are going to be living, with the co-working space. And I think if we'd had more time, I'm going to echo one of the other commissioners, like to work more on sort of an innovative way to feel that we're getting more of a mixture. I honestly don't think that in the future people are going to be going to a dry cleaning store anymore. I don't think people are going to be shopping the way they've traditionally shopped, and I that just is not going to happen. And I think you guys are really onto something. And I wish we did have more time to work on this. So, I'm finding myself a little closer to Commissioner Miller, but I have, again, but not for the same reasons. I'm just, there wasn't enough there for me to feel like I could say that I think it's good to go forward, so I'm going to support the motion. Thank you.
I'm going to just say a few platitudes, and then we're going to vote. A few, John. I like the project, as I mentioned earlier. I just don't understand. Maybe I'm just totally behind. Michelle, I don't understand why there's so much concern for what is and what is not around this development and the timing of it, because the very essence of being a developer is the mitigation and calculation of risk, and it's all his, not ours. And someone mentioned things that the metro will work based on the things that are around it. And it's really the opposite. That's why they call it transportation-oriented development, which goes back as far as the rail spur in the Old West. It is the metro that will make everything work. There is no if other things will surround this building, unless the metro never opens. It's not about if other developments occur. It's if the ones you know about today occur or not. Maybe Rivanna will never happen, but something's going to happen. If the metro opens, every square foot that you can see that looks like grass today is going to be developed, either into built environment or into green space that is a part of a built environment. Trust me, there won't be a blade of grass available. You won't be able to afford it. I don't understand how we are penalizing this man for being first. That's it. That's the only thing we're doing. It's disguised by a whole bunch of policy and conversations sounding like planners. I happen to be a developer. And the point of the matter is we're penalizing this man for having the vision and taking the risk of being there first, because he's got to make it until all these other things happen. Now, whether they happen is a foregone conclusion. When they happen is the gamble. I've seen people get to the hot spot too early and not be able to last. And I've seen that happen before. But whether or not he's in the hot spot first is not up for debate. And whether or not every square foot around him is going to be something special, that's not up for debate either. So all this nonsense about, oh, there's not enough retail, it's going to be retail and houses, and what we need around and what is going to be around the metro are going to be people. That is a vehicle to move people, not retail. We need places for people to live. That's about workforce. It's not about retail. Those are amenities for the people who live there. That train is there to move people to work centers. And we too concerned about the amenities, which is secondary. And if there are people, you got it all backwards. The train brings the people bring the amenities. Trust me, if there are people there, the amenities will come and they'll sleep outside in order to sell those people something. They'll sit outside under a tent all night to sell those people something. This is flawed logic, and we're penalizing this man for having vision and being first. Anyway, with that, do you have a closing?
No, because I don't want it to, not a productive one, so.
Okay, so the motion is laid upon the table. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 All those opposed? Aye.
You're opposed?
Nay.
You're opposed?
I oppose.
Nay.
Nay.
Okay, so the ayes have it, 6-3, and the nays are Commissioner Miller, Chairman Hayes, and Commissioner Kirshner. Thank you, gentlemen. I believe that is the end of our work session items for the evening. Mr. Galindo, do we have administrative items?
A few brief notes.
Okay.
The first is that our first work session on Nirvana will be next week. We will anticipate getting the packet out to you tomorrow. I think I could probably tell you the dates for the public hearing and work session tonight, but I'm going to corner Commissioner Barnes and check on at least one of them because his one vote could push a meeting one way or the other. But hopefully by tomorrow, I'll be able to give you those dates. We can get them on all of your calendars. If you did not see my emails from earlier in the week, there are some lovely trainings that the county is requiring of all of us, staff, as well as the commissioners. So if you have not already done those, please do so. The cyber security training does not have to take you very long, if you understand. And the other one will take you somewhat longer, the target solutions training, but it also does not have to take the full 6.5 hours that it states that it does. Just a word of warning.
During the work session, or?
Could you maybe present them to us directly all together?
It has to be under your own logins, unfortunately.
Pay money for answers.
Let's go home.
FYI. Yeah. FYI, the 9 members of the board do not have to take any of the training. Their staff does, but not the 9 members of the board.
We're not officially employees.
I don't make the rules. This is just what they've asked us to tell you.
No, you're not employees.
But that is all, Mr. Chairman.
You can't log on? Dan, what are
The due date for the target solutions training is June 30th. For the know before training, actually has already passed, but it was a couple days ago. That one doesn't take any time at all. Yes.
Chairman Hayes, I move that the Planning Commission adjourn.
The Planning Commission work session for Thursday, June 9th, 2022 is now adjourned. Sorry, guys.
You don't need a vote on a motion to adjourn, do you?